Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pharma Times editor John Pinching. Welcome to this innovative trials webinar entitled Navigating Patients Step by Step on Their Clinical Trial Journey. In recent years, patients have never been more curious about and invested in their own health. Patient 2.0 wants to be a stakeholder in their own future and is interested in helping to develop new treatments. The task for pharma and wider healthcare is to create an infrastructure which allows people to effectively participate in research without causing huge disruption to their lives. The possibilities that technology and modernization can bring in the redesigning of clinical trials is limitless, but establishing dynamic recruitment and engaging systems poses a significant challenge, and patients will need the confidence to navigate the new world. Today, our panel of experts will be sharing their experiences and wrestling with some of the conundrums. They are Carrie Riley, Patient Recruitment Manager at Innovative Trials, Kristin Faber, Vice President of Clinical Trial Patient Recruitment at Spectrum Science, Adele Sepulveda, Patient Navigator at Innovative Trials, and Gwen Barger, Site Manager at CCT Research. Following their presentations, we've got our Navigating Patients Through Clinical Trials Q&A session. During this, and indeed the whole webinar, you can use the BrightTalk interface to submit questions to the panel. Throughout the webinar, we also have a series of polling questions, which, again, you can use the interface to answer. Okay, now I'll hand over the controls to Carrie for the first presentation. Carrie.
Thank you, John, for that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about the important topic of properly supporting patients through the clinical trial journey. And before we begin, we'd like to start with a question to the audience. So bear with me here while I launch a quick poll question. So the poll question is, are you struggling to recruit and retain patients in your clinical trials? We do know that without the right support, up to 30% of study participants withdraw from their study at some point through their journey. So go ahead and answer yes or no to this question. I'm curious to see the feedback everyone has. Give everyone just a minute to answer. I think the answer is obviously, it's an obvious one. 100% of you are saying yes at this point, which, patient retention is a topic that many of us are striving to understand how to improve, and is one of the topics I will be discussing today. So Innovative Trials focuses on delivering patient recruitment strategies by adopting a patient and site-centric approach. This approach has been delivered through our clinical enrollment manager support over the years. And in recent years, Innovative Trials has been working to increase our focus on supporting the patient throughout their clinical trial journey. But the question was, how can we do this? And that is how the Navigator was born, a step-by-step approach to supporting patients. Patient sites and sponsors have unique challenges that require different levels of support. Patients may have issues troubleshooting with the required study device, questions about how and when they will receive their study payment, the required use of other study platforms, and of course, general questions related to visits, the protocol, or participation anxieties. Our Navigator team has real-life experience with all of these challenges in different capacities and are supported upfront with mental health first aid training before speaking with patients. Sites, on the other hand, have other unique challenges. Challenges with staff resourcing, for example. On occasion, sites are understaffed and live with the reality of juggling numerous studies at once, all while ensuring the highest quality of care for their patients. Site staff resourcing goes hand in hand with time that sites have to spend troubleshooting patient challenges, time it takes to filter through an influx in digital referrals and providing swift follow-up, and time it takes to maintain constant communication with current study participants to ensure high patient retention. In regards to sponsor challenges, the Patient Navigator has been shown to bridge the gap between what the sites are feeling and experiencing on a daily basis in reporting this immediate feedback to the sponsor. This in turn results in quicker support to study sites. Innovative Trials' solution to all of these challenges is our Patient Navigator team. We have qualified individuals who are available, locally placed, and compassionate for the work that they do. So a closer look at what the Navigator is and how Innovative Trials uses it currently to support patients and sites through its use. So what is our Patient Navigator service? So it is designed to provide individualized assistance to patients and caregivers throughout their clinical trial journey, designed to add an additional layer of pre-screening on behalf of sites. We utilize it because it allows patients and caregivers to have easy and direct access to knowledgeable study staff to assist with questions or concerns that they may have. It can also reduce site burden, allowing them to focus on other areas of study delivery and patient care. And how does it work for Innovative Trials? Well, it can actually be tailored, to the needs of the study, but, it can act as a proactive or a reactive approach. So proactive meaning, our team can make outbound calls to patients or sites or caregivers, and reactive meaning, our team can be on standby for a certain number of hours a day and be readily available to assist with any query that comes in. It is currently available to patients, caregivers, and sites via phone and email, and also has the ability to be available via chat as well. Through direct experience and feedback, the Navigator naturally has fallen into two different support categories. One of them being through participant and caregiver support. Direct support for the participant and caregiver is ideal for complex and innovative study designs, which are often difficult to enroll, such as rare disease or pediatric studies. It is also useful for studies where it is known that retention will be difficult. Let's say a study has a 5-year follow-up period. There must be a plan in place to retain those patients during the 5 years. So perhaps a monthly or quarterly call from a patient navigator should be considered at that point. Lastly, we have seen great benefit to patient navigator supporting decentralized trials to bridge the gap between patient, site, and sponsor. Navigator support in this instance can also reduce the feeling of isolation that patients may feel when enrolled in a decentralized trial. The other support category that has evolved is through pre-screening referrals on behalf of study sites. The patient navigator in this scenario aims to provide a second layer of pre-screening support with digital referrals within 1 to 2 business days of the referral being received. Again, very useful for studies with a high number of referrals or studies with a high site burden. This goes back to the site support and really guarding the site's resource and time and ultimately reducing their daily burden. The support is also useful for studies with subjective inclusion-exclusion criteria, as the pre-screening questionnaires have limitations with really supporting eligibility at times. The navigator can and do currently take additional time to really comb through inclusion-exclusion questions and have a deeper conversation with patients to really ensure quality eligible patients are referred to study sites. Excuse me. As patient navigators, we need to be prepared for any kind of question or query that comes through. Our team is qualified to assist with certain categories, and other categories, such as medical-related questions, we would defer to the study sites. We do always instruct that our navigators are not medical professionals and are not qualified to assist with any medical-related queries. But if that situation were to arise, our team would be notifying via a warm transfer to the site. So here are 2 scenarios that I'd like to share that our navigators can help patients, caregivers, or even sites with. Excuse me. A participant can contact the patient navigator asking a question such as, I've not received my IMP and study device yet. Do you know when I can expect to receive this? So through, the upfront training that our navigators receive, they can double check the protocol. They can check the other study platforms that they have access to, and they can check their reference guide, which kind of houses similar scenarios that they've encountered in the past. And then they can give the patient, the caregiver, an expected timeline of when they should receive the IMP and study device. And an example for a situation that we cannot assist with is when a participant contacts the patient navigator asking, can you assist with these symptoms I'm experiencing? So of course, we need to be equipped to answer the call in these scenarios. However, our navigator would immediately provide a warm transfer to the study site. If that is not successful, we would follow up immediately with an email requiring that the site confirms their receipt of that communication. So I'm hoping a little bit of what I shared has sparked some curiosity and generated some questions that the speakers will happily address at the end. And with that said, I'm delighted to share our next speaker with you from Spectrum Science, Kristen Faber.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Faber. I'm a VP over clinical trial recruitment. If you haven't heard of Spectrum Science before, we're a health marketing agency. So we've worked with, or I specifically have worked with innovative trials for a long time now through a couple of different organizations. So I'm excited to speak today about what the Navigators can bring to the sponsor perspective. I think we all know that regardless of whether a study's enrollment period is on target or if they're behind or if there's a concern that it's going to fall behind, one of the fastest growing aids to patient recruitment are media campaigns. With the inclusion of media campaigns, come study websites, website pre-screeners, and a lot of referrals. And we all know, unless you're looking at a study that's hyper-targeted or in a very rare therapeutic area, that sometimes the amount or the volume of referrals that come through in these website pre-screeners can be pretty overwhelming for a site. It's not uncommon for, a women's health study or something to generate thousands of referrals for sites. With that website pre-screeners, there's only so much that you can capture. You don't want to put questions on a website pre-screener that a patient can't answer. You don't want to put free text fields where they, have to type in the name of a drug that they're on because they may not know what it is. When a lot of the questions that are part of a study's eligibility criteria are better asked in a scenario where they can have a real conversation with someone that can help guide them on what they need, what they don't need, and really make sure that they're the best fit for a study. In addition, I think, we can all agree that with media campaigns, from a sponsor perspective, one of the most important parts to that campaign is being able to measure the return of investment. And a traditional media campaign, when you have all these referrals coming in, if it's putting a site underwater and they're unable to keep up with the updates, they're unable to tell you, we have 600 referrals and, we're trying to move them through, but it's difficult for them to be able to routinely update these patients to randomized or discontinued or screen failed. And with that, it's impossible for us to have a clear idea of what the return on investment is. While getting patients in and making sure that they randomize, we also want to make sure that that campaign is successful. And that's really where the patient navigators can make the biggest difference for a sponsor. Oh, sorry, screen froze for a minute. So patient navigators are able to step in on behalf of study sites, and they add this additional layer of screening from the eligibility criteria that, like we said, may not be appropriate for a website screener. So it really allows sponsors to have better quality referrals sent to the study sites, which in turn can result in less referral volume, but better quality referrals, so that it's not on the sites to screen out someone who would never qualify for this study, but maybe the website screener didn't catch. This also allows the navigators to catch duplicate referrals. We've run into a handful of scenarios where referrals will take a screener over and over and over until they pass, or they don't realize that they're hitting submit twice, and the site will end up with multiple referrals who are actually the same person. So when we have a navigator on, they take care of that for the site. The patient navigators also update the referral statuses on behalf of study sites. So as referrals are moving through the screening process, it gives sponsors a clear indication of what their funnel numbers are and clearer metrics. They contact referrals within 48 hours. They update referral statuses in real time. So we always have a pretty good idea of what those metrics are, and it gives us a much more realistic view of how a campaign is performing, or where we may need to boost spend for a site or pull back if a site is getting overwhelmed. They also collect a lot of additional information around screening, screen fails, randomization, or discontinue. The information for each of those individual referrals is communicated back to the media vendor. I think we get the reports once a week, but we've always had that option of how often do we need it. So it allows the navigators to manage the referral status. It takes that burden off of the sites and lets the sites really focus on their patients, which is, where we want them to focus. It's where their focus needs to be. It just allows them to kind of focus on the important parts of the media campaign without getting bogged down in the day-to-day of pre-screening referrals. I will say additionally, it's not on this slide, but I think one of the biggest benefits, or another benefit of having the navigators, when you have a study that has a lot of sites, a lot of vendors take a one-size-fits-all approach. That has not been our experience with Innovative. I think one of the biggest compliments that we get about them, whether it's from the sites or from us, is that they really work with the site to come up with a plan that works for them. So I have a study that's running right now that I'll show you guys the metrics for in just a second, where each site is kind of going about it a little bit differently. Some of them want their navigator to contact referrals on their behalf. They want them to schedule them for a screening visit. They kind of want everything. And the navigators are happy to do that. There are other sites where they want to be the ones to schedule the screening visit. They just want the navigators to handle that upfront lift, that additional layer of screening, to make sure that when they reach out to a referral that they're going to answer the phone, that they're a good fit for the study, that they live near the study site, and they're happy to do that. We have some other sites that are on the East Coast, and they just want someone to be able to help them, for a couple of hours after they close, and they've been happy to do that. We have navigators on the West Coast that fill in for a couple of hours after. So it's really beneficial to have a company that really does work with the sites on a site-by-site basis, and they come up with a plan that works for that individual site's needs, instead of just, every site's going to get the same layer of support, because we all know that doesn't work. So instead of having a high opt-out rate for sites, we have a list of which sites are accepting which level of support, and that can change during a project, and that's fine too. Going to this next slide, this is a live study that we're working on with Innovative right now. So you can see, before we brought on pre-screening support, our media campaign had been running for, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but about 3 or 4 months. And we were only running paid search at the time. So we had a lower number of referrals, but the sites got overwhelmed pretty quickly. It went from 0 to 100 very fast. So you can see, as we moved down the funnel, there was a lot that was sitting and pending that they just couldn't get to, or if they could get to, they didn't have the time to update it. And the percentages just kind of go down and down and down as we get towards enrolled. We brought the navigators on in February, which was, I think, right about the 4-month mark. We launched a bunch of additional screening, and the number of referrals, it went through the roof very quickly. So we were a little concerned with, the volume of referrals coming in. They jumped right into it. They were amazing. We didn't have to decrease outreach volume to any of the sites, regardless of, you can see the increase in referrals was pretty steep. But the biggest difference is, you'll see here, with the increase in referrals from 261 to 1490, once the call center came on, only 3% of those referrals were pending. And this is including, I think at the time we had 3 sites that had opted out of call center support. So this is including those 3 sites that they didn't want any support at all. And, the uncontactable are patients that they had tried to contact multiple times, they weren't responsive. And then screening scheduled, screening failed, and enrolled. So you can just kind of see, within 4 months, we had 7 patients that were marked as enrolled. I don't think that this was any coincidence. This was just letting sites have that additional layer of support so that they could focus where they needed to focus. And, if they had a patient that enrolled, then they told the navigator, and the navigator updated it on their behalf. So really just made things much easier for them, and much easier for us to, really determine what we needed to do with the media campaign. Did we need to add anything in or take it out, or how was this going? So And with that, I will hand this over to Adele, who is, I think all of us on this call will agree she's amazing. She is one of the navigators that both myself and Gwen and Carrie work with on a daily basis, and to tell you a little bit more about the patient journey.
Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, depending on where you are at. I am one of about 9 patient navigators at Innovative Trials. And we have discussed the concept of and reviewed the metrics of patient navigator. But let's look at who the navigator is. I'd like to say that we serve as a guide. We lead sites to solutions through collaboration. We do our best to collaborate with the site to understand the problem and work through it together to find a solution. We also steer subjects to answers by educating them. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. I had someone call in and ask if they took one too many doses of their medication. But thankfully, I knew the protocol and I just educated them on their max puff for the day. And they felt good. They felt empowered after knowing that they did not go over what they were supposed to puff. And they felt better about the knowledge that I shared with them. We also serve as a resource. We direct sites by redirecting them to involve their patients sometimes to help troubleshoot. And we also instruct patients on navigating their way through platforms, whether it's to obtain payment information or to change the way they receive their payments. I'd like to say that we serve as support. We serve as a site aid to some of our sites, and we do that by taking the burden off the site. They pass the baton to us, and we are more than happy to take the challenge on and help them with whatever it is that they are working through. We also are that listening ear. I had a subject call in, did not qualify for the study, which is typical sometimes. And I could have hung up at any point. But the unique thing about Patient Navigator is that we are humane, versatile, and we can be the non-judgmental person just to listen to someone who is in need. I might have been the first person who brought compassion, care, and concern to that subject just by listening. And that is who a patient navigator is. Now for some real life examples. I had a subject thank me one time for staying on the phone so that they can straighten out their payment issue. Now, this subject was an elderly person, and not everyone is technologically savvy, not even myself. And I was on the phone with this subject for about 2 hours. And that is just what we do. We do not hand out a number and say, here, call this number and I'm done for the day. We go that extra mile. And that is just what we do. I know that I am not eligible for the study, but can you stay on the line with me? This is a very memorable person. And I absolutely stood on the line with this person. And during my time on the phone with this patient, I was able to help them look on clinicaltrials.gov and identify another study they were interested in. And that is where caring for people comes into play as a patient navigator. It's about the experience for them. My next one is, I'm so glad you called and I thought my device was broken. Now I know what I need to look for if this occurs again. In this scenario, a patient called in stating the device was not working. I did all the normal troubleshooting steps that I would in this situation, and it was not working. I just paused and I asked the patient, how long have you had your inhaler? The patient stated, since January. I figured, well, it's May. And I thought, let's put the new inhaler in the device and see if that'll work. Sure enough, almost immediately, the results were in the portal. And this is just half of a day in the life of a patient navigator. Thank you for your time. I will pass the baton on to Gwen Barger.
Well, thank you, Adele. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Gwen Barger. I am with CCT Research. I am a site manager. Our location is based in Atlanta, Georgia, one of the kind of suburbs in Atlanta. And I have been so grateful for innovative trials. Specifically, one protocol, I've had to use them a lot. They're sometimes, as you know, protocols and or the vendors, there's not a lot of clarity and things aren't as streamlined as we would hope they would be. And being that we are all more virtual now, it's even more important that communication is clear, directions are clear, user manuals are clear. But there have been some instances where I've had to, for instance, contact Adele when I was literally on the phone with the patient for probably 2 hours trying to get one of their devices to connect to one of the portals. At the time, there wasn't really good communication. I didn't know who I could email, who I could call, but I was able to find a resource, and Adele was there for me. And ever since then, she's been able to help and troubleshoot, and she's assured me that to always reach out if we need that support. Many times, again, the devices aren't working the way that they're ideally set up to work. So it's been really helpful to take that burden off the site, knowing that I can try to troubleshoot on my end, but I have that resource in the background to go to. And Adele's even called me just to check on me when there haven't been patient issues. So I really do appreciate the support that I've gotten from Innovative Trials. And I just wanted to share my experience and how streamlined and I really appreciate their approach and their dedication. And I look forward to working with them continuously on our current protocol that we use with them. I believe there's one more presenter, Carrie. Thank you guys for the time again. I'll go ahead and I'll mute myself.
Thanks, Gwen. So I feel like there's really no better way to end our discussion than with some patient, site, and sponsor testimonials. And I'll just share a few with you. And they're just a few examples, again, on top of Adele's examples of how our Navigator team has helped support really all of the parties that are involved in the clinical trial journey. So as I stated, just they're labeled here: patient, CRA, site, PI, sponsor feedback, patient support. So just a couple here that I'd like to highlight. So to reduce the site burden, the sponsor requested that the Navigator team become subject matter experts for the study device. So quite early on in one of our current projects, there were a lot of study device issues that maybe weren't anticipated. So the sponsor saw the opportunity for our Navigator team to become the subject matter experts. So additional training was provided, additional guidance, and that's kind of the communication that has been sent out to sites, is that if there are any device related questions, please have your patients and also your sites contact the patient Navigator team. Another example is for patient support. A participant recently reported an AE to one of our Navigator teams before notifying their study site. So this isn't something we would typically anticipate, but we do have processes in place for these situations if they were to occur. But I really believe that this is a testament to the trust and comfort that participants feel with our Navigator team. Even study CRAs have reached out and provided really positive feedback. Just like sites, sometimes CRAs are feeling a little bit lost sometimes on the ever-changing kind of processes that occur. So just the feedback that they are really happy and thankful that they can refer sites to the service to also reduce the amount of time they are troubleshooting with sites. So not only are sites spending a lot of time troubleshooting, but the CRAs also are as well. And that's where our Navigator team can step in and really spend that extra time on the phone with the patients. Even some positive feedback from a PI recently. So with a current study, there are several study portals to be logging into, which means logging credentials that are ever changing, right? So some recent feedback is that one of our patient navigators guided the PI to reset their login credentials and where to locate and reset this option. So again, PIs are really, really busy individuals. And it might seem simple just to change your password, log in, but if you're not getting a password reset email and you don't know where actually the reset option is, this is a really simple task that our team can help with. We received really positive feedback about that. And then kind of the last example I would like to share is from a patient who was having issues with their study payments. So we do know that the study payments tend to be a pretty popular topic of help that our Navigator team supports with. So in this situation, the participant was threatening to withdraw from the study if they weren't going to receive their payment. And our Navigator team was able to de-escalate the situation and ultimately retain the patient. So before we actually close out, I would just like to end with one final poll question based on all of the speakers and their presentations. So I'll go ahead and launch that poll now. It is launched. Do you think the Navigator can help you and your patients? So we have three options: yes, no, and maybe. I need to know more about it. And if you need to know more about it, I hope that you will ask some questions in the Q&A session coming up. So I'll give everyone just a minute to start answering, and we'll go ahead and check responses. And just to kind of give you guys a recap as well, after I closed the first poll, it was 90% of you had said yes, that you do struggle to retain patients in your clinical trial. So 90% had said yes. So currently we're seeing that 80% of you do think that the Navigator can help you and your patients in some way. So we'd love to hear some questions next from the audience. Questions are definitely welcome, and any one of the speakers will be able to step in and answer. Back to you, John.
Brilliant. Thank you very much to all our speakers today. And I think they've given everybody much to ponder, particularly as we enter the brave new world of patient recruitment and sort of wider clinical trials across the world. So I've got some probing questions for our panel. So I shall start at the very beginning. In the modern clinical trial ecosystem, how important is wider lived experience alongside the minutiae of patient data? Who'd like to take that one?
I can step in and take that one. Is that referring to the experience of the patient navigator team?
Yeah, I think it also, when you're talking about lived experience, I suppose it's sort of emotional as well, mental, and you've touched on the sort of wider support that perhaps wouldn't have been available 10 years ago. So yeah, I think it's talking about the sort of broader experience, I suppose.
Sure. So our Navigator team is made up of highly qualified clinical research professionals. So we have individuals like Adele, who are previous study coordinators. So she knows at a site level the burden that they feel on a daily basis. They feel, she knows what the pressure is and how sometimes, there's just not enough time in the day. So we do really ensure that our Navigator team is armed with upfront experience based on their previous work history. And then also I mentioned previously that we do provide mental health first aid training before any sort of patient calls commence. So we do think that's important because we need to be really able to adequately support these patients. There's no way we can predict whether or not a patient's going to call in and have kind of a crisis that they need to talk about. And we want to ensure that our team is ready and able to support them in any way they can. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add to that.
Well, I think you've cleared that up nicely. Actually, let's move on to Adele, because I think you mentioned you're talking to people on the phone. I think possibly understandably, people can be a bit cagey and might even accuse you of being in a call center and not caring. So already you've got the challenge of engendering their trust. So what skills is it important to have as you build that relationship with patients?
Well, I think one of the most important skills that you need to have as we think a human being is compassion and respect. Everyone deserves to be respected. And I think without that, then you can't establish trust. So, yeah.
And that is why we all love Adele. And just to kind of pile on to what Adele is saying too, I think, we've been with Spectre, I was previously at ParExcel for a very long time, and that was when I started working with innovative trials. And whether it was at ParExcel or at Spectrum, we have been very, very careful not to call them a call center. I don't think there's anyone on this line who would disagree that we have all had negative experiences with call centers. You never get the same person twice. A lot of times it doesn't seem like they're qualified to answer what question you're asking, whether it's something tech related, or it's a nightmare. I hate calling into call centers. So, this is a nomenclature thing for me. You have to be very careful to make sure that patients don't feel like they're contacting a call center. And, I think we're calling them a site support team, or, patient navigators, or whatever it may be, just to try to differentiate that initial upfront experience of what you're going into expecting versus what you get out of it. I love the navigators. I think they're amazing. And you get to know them really well. And one of the greatest things about having these navigators on is that each navigator has a site. Or they have multiple sites, but that site is only going to work with one navigator. It's not a different person contacting the referrals every single time. It's one person. So from a site level, you get to know them. From a sponsor side, you get to know them. And from a referral side, when you have multiple questions and you're talking to them, it's the same person. You're not talking to 7 different people who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, so there is that aspect of relationship building, which isn't going to cease at the end of the call, but is something that can grow and produce results on a long-term basis. Okay, let's continue talking about the impact of patient navigators. I think ultimately, as it becomes part of the wider clinical trials culture, I think what patients want to see ultimately is improved access to therapies, while also being the touch paper for new treatment pathways. So can somebody talk to me about how the patient navigator system can improve those two aspects? Who'd like to take that?
I think that's a difficult one. To me, we, as an example, and I know that this isn't probably super common, but we have a study coming up with the patient navigators where we have 2 very similar protocols running with the same sponsor. And ideally, what will happen is the navigators will make that determination between which study a patient is a better fit for before referring them onto a site. And so they really kind of have that hand, and they have to have that understanding of the protocol. But it's also, when you're talking to a patient, it's not just one option. They have multiple options. If they don't qualify for one study, they may qualify for another. Or, if they go through a website screener and they feel like one study would be a better fit for them, then the navigator can take that additional step in explaining the study and, how that one might be a better fit for them instead. I think outside of patient navigators, a lot of media vendors are offering things like a virtual waiting room now. And I think that is probably helping patients have access to different trials, or improving access to different therapies. And essentially what that does is if they don't qualify for one study, they go into this virtual waiting room. And if there's another study coming up that they would be a better fit for, then their information is held and they're contacted at that time. So I think, my expertise is mostly in rare disease. So something like that is huge in that indication because there are so few therapies available. But I think in terms of new patient or new treatment pathways, having people like Adele who have that medical background, and it's not, Joe from California who used to work at a hot dog stand, they're better able to talk to patients about what their therapeutic journey is going to look like, or, what their study experience is going to be. And if they're not happy with their study experience, what their next steps may be. So just to kind of tie innovative back into this, I think that is huge for, pushing new treatment pathways and ensuring that patients are on the right treatment pathway, or that they have availability to look at maybe another therapy that they haven't considered previously.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. In terms of patient navigator location relative to the location of the person seeking advice and support, where are they typically located? Does it matter where they're located? And would it be a criteria for patient navigators to, for example, speak multiple languages?
I can take this one. That's a great question. So at Innovative Trials in general, we pride ourselves on having locally placed individuals. So whether we're talking about clinical enrollment managers or patient navigators, it's the same story. Locally placed navigators within the country where patients are calling from. And that's important because, we need individuals who know the local culture, the local language, and the local healthcare as well. So that if we are employing studies within the United States, we'll have individuals in the United States, but likely they'll also be bilingual individuals, English and Spanish. And likewise, if we're going to, run a study in France, we will have locally placed navigators in France that speak the local language as well.
Oh, that's tremendously reassuring. We've got another great question from the audience here. Would a patient navigator be used in place of a CEM? And when would you select one over the other?
I can take this one as well. So they would not replace CEMs, but they would work in parallel, I would say, with CEMs. We have a current project right now where both CEM support and Navigator support is being provided on the study. So CEM support really focuses on site support. It's telephone-based coaching, recruitment strategies, barriers, working through different barriers and providing suggestions and creating mitigation plans and critical time points for the site. And then where the navigator would differ is where we would be speaking to patients and to sites also, but primarily patients, and supporting them directly on their clinical trial journey.
Excellent. Thank you for making that crystal clear. Now, it seems to me a lot of this process is about transparency and trust and working together. In terms of patient navigators, how important is it within clinical trials and perhaps in the background that companies are collaborating and that there is cross-sector partnerships, and just generally a feeling that in contrast to perhaps the pharma of old where working separately happened rather a lot, that the partnerships and productive partnerships are unfolding?
I can take this one. I don't think anyone would be shocked that I'm going to say it is probably one of the most important parts of a project. It used to be that it was very important to keep everything separate. Vendors were very separate from sponsor management. They fell under CRO. They only ever talked to the CRO. But, I think as we kind of move forward, and especially with DCT models and with the Navigator specifically having this additional layer to push referrals into sites, what comes with that is, sites communicate with the Navigators oftentimes more frequently than they're communicating with a CRA or, whatever insert the equivalent of a CRA is here. And there has to be a way to get that information back to the appropriate person. Where the issue comes in is that most of us from a CRO side or from a sponsor side are blinded to a lot of this information that can come from referrals. So we can't help, we can just kind of direct. So for me personally, anytime you work with a vendor, they have an NDA in place, they have a CDA in place. So, I can understand where you don't want, 7 different groups talking to each other and information getting lost. But I think it's really important for especially the Navigators to have a direct line of communication with someone that can answer questions, that can respond quickly and effectively, and that are, and I cannot stress this enough, most importantly, unblinded. Because, like I said, a lot of questions that are coming from patients after they're randomized or from sites is information that we can't see. And they can. They're fully unblind to this. So, to me, I think just having that trust and that communication with the vendor that you're going to be working with for 6 months or a year or however long it is, it just makes the process so much easier. And I don't know why it was previously where everything just kind of flowed through one person. I think there can be some benefits to that, but in clinical trial world where you've got blinded versus unblinded, and you have a medical team and a clinical team and a project management team that don't always connect on the same wheels, they need to have that line of communication where, if there's an urgent question, they know who to go to. So that's my take on it anyways.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as these new concepts and these new ideas and patient navigators blossom and start to define the clinical trial landscape a bit more, are you noticing a shift in patient perception as they come on board with you guys?
I think, sorry, I don't want to keep jumping in on all of these questions. I think for me, like I said, my experience is mostly with rare disease or oncology. In those two spaces, absolutely yes. And I understand that is probably very different to a study with healthy volunteers or, that is in an indication that is maybe more common. But for the indications that I've been part of, where we're looking at a very small audience, or we're looking at a very small subset, or we're looking at patients who are on 3rd-line chemo and running out of options, absolutely yes, because those patients tend to be the ones that are much more well-versed in clinical research. And a lot of them understand that for them to find a treatment that truly works for them, if they're multiple years into a diagnosis, or like I said, 3rd-line chemo, research that's where you go. Those aren't typically indications where I feel like we have to spend a lot of time explaining what research trials are or why they're important. And we instead can focus on what is this going to do for you, or what could this do for you? What is a visit schedule going to look like? Those are patients that just need a little less hand-holding, because they know that space. So I'll leave that to Gwen or Adele if you guys have had other indications that maybe are more common that's different for you guys?
I can just add a little bit to that. So I think, you know, with one of our current projects as well, we can see that we have what we call repeat offenders or repeat callers. So it's clear to see the trust and the relationship that's been built with the patients and the navigators. You know, at first, I think it was a little bit slow, and there was a ramp up period on the amount of phone calls we were getting. But over time, we're seeing, you know, patients call in that have called in previously because they know they're getting a resolution to their answers. And they know, and we know also that, you know, they can go to their study sites. The response time might just be a little bit slower. But we have proven that we can respond. You know, we can first pick up the phone, we can troubleshoot for as long as it takes, and we can provide a resolution. So it's really great to see, you know, repeat callers and repeat subjects utilize our service over a period of time.
Yeah, I can imagine that would increase your confidence. Adele, perhaps you can take this one. Obviously, with all conditions, the progress in treatments and so on is constantly changing. How do you make sure that your knowledge of specific conditions is constantly being updated?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, what I like to do is I just really like to, keep on top of, you know, things that are new, upcoming. So I'm always updated. And I like to, especially with whatever protocol that I'm on, I really like to take a deep dive into it and immerse myself into that particular protocol or disease. And then I just always try to ensure that throughout the duration of the study, I stay on top of that particular therapeutic area, just to stay on top of anything new and upcoming.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that's very reassuring for callers too. Okay, next question from the audience. I work for a sponsor and we generally use many media vendors to find participants online for the same study. Can the patient navigator work with multiple media vendors working on the same study?
I can take this one. So we do actually have a similar scenario that is ongoing right now. Same study, 2 vendors that we are actioning digital referrals coming in. So I think first and foremost, we just kind of need to streamline the processes. We need to make sure all of the key players are all aligned with who is responsible for what. And then I would definitely streamline the process across the board as well, kind of using the same process for all vendors. Obviously, another thing that we pride ourselves on is just being able to adapt and be dynamic. And, you know, if one thing doesn't work for one vendor but works for another and it's an absolute must, you know, that's okay too. But it's definitely something that we currently have experience with, and that is ongoing right now.
Excellent. Thank you. This is a question for all our luminaries today on the panel. And I suppose what we are finding out about here is the excitement of a kind of modern model, a model template, which is going to be driving similar things in the future. And I just would like to know what motivates you to make this a success, and why do you believe in it so much?
I can go first on this one, and I've said this many times. To me, it just makes sense. We have patients every day entering a clinical trial, probably their first time, and you know, clinical trials in today's day and age is it can be a controversial topic. So having someone there that, you know, a patient can talk to at 8 o'clock at night, Eastern Standard Time, perhaps. If they have a question that they just can't get out of their head, that they really need some reassurance with, we have someone there for them. I think patient retention is such a huge topic right now, and we need a really strong plan in place to ensure patient retention. We can't just hope that the sites and CRAs, can stay on top of all that. And that's where the patient navigator team really steps in. They're the day-to-day support system that can be added to any study.
From my perspective, they work. It just works. We've, like I said, I've been working with them for a long time, and I push hard to have them on every study, because whether it is, whether you're recruiting 26 patients or you're recruiting 2,600 patients, I've seen them work. I've seen how effective they can be. We've gotten feedback from sites that it just runs so much more seamlessly when they can focus on referrals that are truly good quality referrals. Referrals that the navigators have already had a first line of contact. So if they're referring a patient to a site, that referral has answered the phone. So, one of the biggest complaints that we get from sites when we don't have the navigators on is that it's overwhelming to contact a ton of referrals and they don't even answer the phone, or they don't call you back. And, no site is going to tell you that they have time to call a referral 3 or 4 times just trying to get in touch with them, because the likelihood that they're actually going to come into the site is not good. So, having the navigators as that direct line between website pre-screener to screening visit at a site is huge. And, like Carrie said, it just makes sense. And, for me personally, I've worked with them enough. I've never seen them fail. They've always delivered. I've always gotten compliments back from study sites on, how much easier it is just having them to be a part of that journey.
Thanks very much, and that's a ringing endorsement to say that they never fail. So that's magnificent. Now, as we reach the exciting climax of this Innovative Trials webinar, I'm going to ask one more question, and perhaps, Kristen, you can start by answering what is in many ways an unfair question from me, but sit tight, because I'd like you to climb in the DeLorean and punch in 10 years into the future, and where Patient Navigator and indeed clinical trials might take us in a decade's time.
I think we've made so many improvements in clinical trials. I've been in recruitment and retention for 14 years now, and the difference between 14 years ago and now is night and day. So I think 10 years from now, we're probably all going to look back and laugh at how complex and difficult we've made things for ourselves. Because adding things in like, a navigator or an additional layer of screening, or having someone on site to help support, whatever a site's needs are, it just seems like logic. And, most of us being in this industry are very logical and realistic and straight to the point. And when you think about something like this being a part of a journey and growing with clinical trials and where we're going to be 10 years from now, this has always made sense. We're just at a point where I think more and more pharma companies are starting to see the benefit of investing in something like this. And so, I think that it's only going to continue to grow. It's only going to continue to make sense for this to be part of every study.
Beautifully crystallized there, Kristen. Thank you. And Carrie, please summarize in the next minute what is going to happen in 10 years' time.
Well, I probably have a wish list, so maybe I can check all those boxes. But I can only kind of echo what Kristen said. Having this as an opportunity for patients on any trial that they enroll on, and then also Innovative Trials, with their Clinical Enrollment Manager program, they have CEMs in over 70 countries at one point. So I, hope for major expansion and to be aligned with all countries as well, that we have CEMs located in as well. So it's something we're, currently working on, just hoping to expand, even further. Hopefully the sky's the limit.
Doesn't the future seem tremendously exciting? Right, that's just about it, folks. Thank you very much to all spectacular panelists. And just to let you know, probably later this evening or tomorrow morning, this webinar will be available online. So in between episodes of Love Island, you can enjoy this all over again. And that just remains for me to say thank you to our audience. Thank you again to our panelists. And hopefully we shall see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.